Hello, in this video I'm going to go through one example that uses composition language 1. You can try out this example using this URL, which I will be putting in the description box. So I'm going to use full screen mode here. Okay, so to remind you, composition language 1 is based on C#. So if you understand C#, you should be able to understand most of this. So here I have a program class, and here I defined an order record that has a single property called ID, and here I have the main method. Now here in the main method I have defined three functions. The first function is called log to console. It takes a single parameter of type string and it prints that string to the console, right? So if I hover over this variable here, the log to console variable, here it says this is a function that takes a string message and returns nothing. Now this second function, log to file, it takes two parameters, message and file name, and it writes the message or appends the message to the file. Now because I'm doing this in the browser, I can't really use the file API in .NET because this is a limitation I did for security reasons, right? But here I'm simulating writing to the file system by writing to the console here. The third function is called process order and log. It takes an order record, right, and a log parameter, and this log parameter is of type action of string. This is basically a function that takes a string, right? So here this function uses the log parameter to log that it's about to process the order, right? And then it writes to the console here. And then after it's done processing, it logs again that it has done processing, right? Now in a real application, this will be replaced with real code that would actually process the order, right? So the signature of this function, it has a parameter of type order and a parameter of type function. And this function takes a string and return nothing, right? So basically this is our process function, which processes an order. And these are two log functions that can be used by this function to log, right? So this function here in specific, it matches the signature of this log parameter, right? And it makes sense that we can use it directly here, right? But this log to file function, it takes two parameters. And in normal C# code, we can't use this function as a value for this parameter, right? So here I'm defining a new function called log to file 1. This function is basically the same as log to file function, but here I'm using the square bracket syntax to rename the file name parameter. So log to file has a parameter called file name, and I would like to rename this parameter to log file name. And this will not modify the existing function, so the existing log to file function would still have its parameter named file name, but the new function log to file 1 will have its parameter called log file name. And in a moment I will explain to you why I did this. So here I'm defining a new function called process order and log to console, and this function is the result of injecting log to console, which is this function here, into process order and log function, right, which is this one here. Now I'm using this plus sign here to indicate that I want to inject this function by type. If I don't use the plus sign here, DIVEX will attempt to inject this function as an argument to the first parameter of process order and log. So if I look at the signature of process order and log, the first parameter is of type order, and we can't really inject log to console as a value for this order parameter, right? But we can inject log to console as a value for the second parameter, right? Because it matches the signature. It takes a string and it returns nothing, right? And by using this plus sign, I'm indicating that I want to inject by type, meaning find the first parameter that I can inject this function into. Now if I look at the signature of this function, it only takes an order parameter, right? Because we already have supplied a value for the second parameter of process order and log. Now this second injection here is more interesting. So here I'm trying to inject log to file 1 this function here, into process order and log. And it's interesting because if we look at the signature of process order and log, the log parameter is a function that takes a single string and returns nothing, but log to file 1 takes 2 string parameters and returns nothing. So in normal C#, you can't really pass this function as a value for the log parameter, right? Because the signatures don't match. But DIVEX allows that, and what happens is, if we look at the signature of the resulting function, we see the order parameter here, which we expect, right? But then we see an extra parameter here, which is log file name. And what happens is, because the log function here has a single string parameter, and the log to file 1 function here has 2 parameters, this first parameter was used to satisfy the log function, right? Because it expects only 1 string parameter, and this second parameter was bubbled up to this resulting function. So basically what this function is telling us, because you asked me to inject a function that takes 2 parameters into a dependency that expects only 1 parameter, there is one unsatisfied parameter, right? So now in order to call this process order and log to file function, we need to pass this parameter here, right? So what does this actually mean? And why is this useful? We were able to inject log to file 1 into process order and log without needing to specify a file name, right? We delayed this decision to a later moment. We fixed the decision to use file logging as opposed to console logging at this moment, but we delayed the decision of which file to log into, right? So now I think it might be clear why I renamed the file name parameter of the log to file function to log file name, right? So at the level of log to file, it's clear that a file name is the logging file, right? But at the level of process order and log to file, a parameter who's named file name is confusing. Like, is it a file to store the order into, or is it a reporting file? It's not clear, but a log file name at this level is clear, right? So here, I'm using this function. I'm further partially applying the log file name parameter. Once I used a file in the C drive called log1.txt, and the second time I used a file called log2.txt in the C drive, right? So now these three functions, process order and log to console, process order and log to log1.txt, and process order and log to log2.txt, all of them have a single parameter called order, right? Here I'm creating an order object and I'm passing it to the three functions, right? Okay, and if I run this code by using Ctrl Shift and X, the function was executed 3 times. In this first time it's logging to the console. In the second time it's logging to c/log1.txt, and in the third time it's logging to log2.txt. So in this video I have demonstrated an important thing about what DIVEX is about, which is the ability to fix certain things and then leave other things unfixed until a later moment in time. And this is a simple example, and in other videos I will go through more complex examples. Thank you for watching.